All right, guys, we're here with Hal Stanton from Groundswell. They are a law firm that specializes in SMB acquisition. Welcome, Hal, to the Workbench. We're a resource rich weekly newsletter and podcast for home service owner operators and associate service providers, and really anyone interested in that industry. So, Hal, thank you for coming on today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Brian. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, no, super glad we got to catch up the other day, and now I can have a little bit more of a fleshed out conversation. I know that M&A is always on the mind of business owners, but particularly it seems over the past 5, 10 years, M&A has really heated up for things like HVAC and plumbers and PE doing roll ups of these companies. So this is by no means my expertise, mostly from what I see on the internet. Is kind of what I'm playing back there, but I'm really excited to hear your perspective as someone who's on the legal side. Before we dive into the nitty gritty of M&A, would love to hear a little bit about you, Hal, and your career and your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, happy to share, and I'll keep it brief. I don't want to bore anyone at home with my long life story. But suffice to say, I wasn't born in America. You may be able to tell from my accent. I was born and raised in the UK, went to undergrad in the UK at the University of Leeds, actually studied engineering for my undergrad, uh, went on into a career in consulting, management consultancy. I was working in London when a partner in that firm came to me and said, "Do you want to move to our New York office? We're trying to grow it." And of course, being a young single guy, I was like, "That sounds like a great idea." So I was on a plane. That was back in 2010. I never ended up going home. And with a couple of intermediate stops along the way, I ended up at Michigan Law School a couple of years later, where I got my JD, and my then girlfriend, now wife, went there with me, and we decided to stay in Detroit. So currently living and working out of Detroit. Groundswell is a California practice, but we're remote first, so we're kind of scattered around the country. And after clerking after law school, I worked at a law firm, Bush Seaforth, for a couple of years before joining Groundswell, which is where I am today.
Awesome. Awesome. Love to hear it. And so tell us a couple questions, but first tell us more about Groundswell and where you guys focus, what you specialize in, and a little bit more about the firm. And then we can go from there.
Yeah, it's the firm's super simple, right? So we're an M&A focused boutique law firm. Boutique means that we don't only do the transactional side of law, right? We're not a full service law firm like a larger law firm may be. And we're focused on helping entrepreneurs buy and sell businesses between 1 and 10 million in enterprise value. And that is all we do day in and day out. We will be honest with you. We did not come across the searcher ETA space on purpose. We found it. We have skills that we thought were useful and that could help the space. And so we've dedicated our law practice to being involved in that ecosystem. And our value proposition is pretty simple, right? It's can we take the skills we have working on larger matters for larger clients, big corporations, right? Multinational corporations. Can we take those skills and apply it to the small business space at a price that makes sense for someone looking to buy or sell a business, under $10 million? Because if you go to a larger firm, of course, you'll drown in legal fees, and that doesn't help anyone. So that's how we ended up where we are, and it's things are going good, and we're looking to stay in the space. It's a great place, lots of exciting customers to work with. We tend to really get along well with our clients, which is great, and we're looking just to expand.
In terms of industry, what trends? Well, who does Groundswell typically service? Is this people buying ice cream shops? Is it people buying bike stores? Is it people buying SaaS companies? Would love to hear more about the industries you focus on. And then naturally, our audience is more in the home service space, so HVAC plumbers, all those good folks. So curious what you're seeing there. So would love the broad strokes in terms of industry breakdown, and then any insights around these specific types of companies in the home services space.
So we're industry agnostic at Groundswell. We'll work with anyone, no matter what industry they're trying to buy or into or sell out of. There are some spaces that require specialist skills that we just don't have in-house, and particularly healthcare, for example, is like a good example, right? Where we may have to partner with an outside law firm, or people may want to look at a larger firm where they have greater expertise, all under one roof. But of the list you gave, the only one I think we haven't done is a bicycle repair shop. So, we do deals in the food and bev space. We
Yeah.
certainly do SaaS and other businesses like that, like e-commerce as well. But home services is kind of where the 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 ETA space really grew up, right? This is buying the HVAC company was the example of ETA of being a searcher, and we've certainly done our fair shares of deals in that space. In fact, home services is much broader than I think than I realized when I first got involved in the space, right? Because home services could mean lawn care, for example. It could mean
Right.
HVAC.
Right.
But I've even been involved in a deal where someone was looking to buy a professional organizer. Do you know what a professional organizer is?
I don't.
It is a business where you pay someone to come into your house and organize your house for you.
Wow. Wow. Marie
I,
Kondo. Yeah.
I had no idea that these businesses existed, but they do, and
Yeah.
lots of them are flourishing. Lots of them are doing very well.
No, yeah, there's as someone who recently moved into a single family home for the first time, still renting, didn't buy yet. Still got a ways to go, but there's so much stuff that happens at a house. Like there's so many things that can go wrong, from the fridge to the backyard to the plumbing to the electricity. There's just a lot that goes into this. So I do know it's a very broad space. Um, and we at my company, Lead Truffle, we work with a ton of different types of those businesses, and they really range, and they're so different. They all do fall under that category of home services. So you mentioned a few vocab words here, Hal, that I've seen, but I'm still learning. So talk to me about searcher and talk to me about ETA.
Yeah, for sure. And apologies if I jumped in without defining those terms. ETA stands for entrepreneurship through acquisition. And it's an umbrella term given to a community of people who are looking to buy their way into entrepreneurship, right? So traditionally, you think of entrepreneurs, you think of startups, you think of people getting into a tiny room and just bootstrapping their way up to unicorn status through some clever technology. But ETA represents a different side of entrepreneurship, and that is I could buy myself a company, good high cash flowing company, and I could become a CEO and skip that kind of difficult step of building a company. Because as you know, many startups fail, right? They don't never get to where they want to go. Whereas in ETA, people are typically looking at enduringly profitable companies, these plumbing businesses that have been around for a generation, right? These HVAC businesses that have just been in the neighborhood for as long as anyone can remember. And they're looking to buy those companies and to improve upon them, but as equally important, just to be their own boss. And the people involved in this ecosystem looking to buy these businesses are called, and they call themselves searchers. They're searching for a business. Uh, Searchers come in two different flavors. You've got traditional searchers and self-funded searchers. Traditional searchers are people who are looking to raise what is known as a search fund to buy these companies, where maybe they're an MBA graduate and they're going to go and seek out investors to not only fund the process of searching for a business, but also eventually the acquisition itself. Self-funded searchers skip the fund out, and now they're traditionally they're just going to go and look for this business and try and fund it with a mixture of potentially some investor capital, but also an SBA loan as well. Uh, at Groundswell, we work with the self-funded searchers. We work with the people like you and I who are just looking to buy those businesses and become their own boss. And we don't tend to work with the traditional search funds, which tend to work with larger law firms.
What industries have you seen be a big focus for searchers over the past 18 months, and how has that changed since the previous 18 months? Are there a particular class of business that you're seeing is really, really attractive right now? Would love to understand more of the details around, what type of companies folks are looking to buy here in 2025.
Yeah, so I would say it's a pretty broad range. I think the one thing that I know a lot of people recognized is those classic searcher businesses, and HVAC I think is such a classic example,
Right.
have become harder to acquire, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot more to the extent private equity is starting to play in this lowest of the lowest end of the lower middle market, this kind of sub 10 million range.
Yeah.
Uh, those are the kind of businesses that have been first to be brought into their kind of midst.
Hmm.
Uh, in addition to that, you see a lot of, for instance, optometry practices are also seeming to attract the attention of private equity, as well as veterinarian centers as well.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
those businesses are all becoming harder to acquire. They're businesses that I think are maybe more attractive to many searchers nowadays are the e-commerce businesses, but only because I think if you don't care, if you're not devoted to home services, right? If your dream isn't to own an HVAC business or a lawn care business, I think there's maybe more accessible to you. There's less of a fight in your hands. But I think the reason that the home services business have become more attractive is because they're enjoyably profitable, right? They are very good businesses often. They're well run. They've got great client base. They're very established. So I think that's just probably going to continue along in that trend.
What are the top three trends or criteria you've seen on the best deals you've worked on, both from the person selling it, from the person buying it? What makes it for a great deal? What are a couple of hallmarks, and then we'll get more into details, I think, for home services. But I'm curious, just what for you when you sit down to work on a deal with the searcher or the potential seller? What are those things where your eyes light up and you go, man, this is going to be a great deal for everyone involved?
Yeah, I think it's a relationship game, to be honest with you, from my personal perspective. So, uh, if I'm representing the buyer, for example, some of the early questions I have for them are, what's your relationship with the seller like? And what's your relationship with the seller's representatives? I mean, the seller's broker is involved in the deal, the seller's lawyer is involved in the deal. And if these people aren't looking to collaborate and work through issues, together,
Right.
then you may have much more of a fight in your hands to get the deal across the line. So I think first and foremost, the thing that makes a deal go well is just the buyer and seller willing to work out any differences and to focus on the longer term picture. And this is also really important because post close, unlike with a mega $1 million deal, right? Unlike with the mega merger of corporations, in small business world, when you close, it'll be the weirdest thing, right? A buyer will close on a deal and they'll go into the office, quote unquote, the next day as the owner of that business, and they won't feel at all like the owner. They will be reliant on the seller to help them get up and running, right? That transitional period, those first few months after close, where the seller is going to make sure that the staff, to the extent there are staff, know who you are and get on well with you, that you know who the suppliers are, that you know everything else about the business. And so if you don't have that strong relationship while you're working out the deal, you probably won't have that strong relationship once the deal closes. And it's going to make your life very, very difficult taking over that business.
What is the contractual obligation typically for the seller to help with the buyer with the transition? Is there
Well,
any?
yes,
Okay.
there is normally some kind of contractual obligation. So uh, these deals often, I think you could say market is probably like around 3 months, right? Where the seller promises as part of the consideration for the deal, as part of the money being paid for the deal, that the seller will be there to help the buyer in some capacity. And in the first week, I think I always advise my clients if they're buyers, just go in there and shadow the seller. Don't even act like you own the business, right? Just go in
Mhm.
there and just watch and just try and understand what's going on a day-to-day basis because you're going to be drinking through a fire hose. But there is always some kind of contractual obligation on behalf of the seller. And normally we encourage our clients to go one step further and just have a loose agreement, right? We want an actual sit down with the seller. You want to think through what the transition period is going to look like. What exactly is the seller going to do? When are they going to introduce you to the suppliers? That kind of stuff. When are they going to teach you about the various different systems that they may be using to keep track of prospective clients? And we want to have that drafted out in a transition services agreement, just so not because we don't trust the seller, again, the relationship part is very important, but because by having that dialogue in the run up to closing, you both have the same expectations once closing happens. And expectation setting is really a big part of it, just so the seller
Mhm.
knows that there is some commitment, that they still have to get out of bed, even though they may have been paid a fairly handsome sum for the business.
Yeah. 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 That might be a weird yeah, and I'd imagine if you've worked on a business or you created a business for 10, 20, 30 years, or it's been a part of your family, to just wake up one day and then not be doing what you've done for the past couple of decades might be a bit jarring. So maybe that transition period helps the seller kind of wind down and get ready for the next phase of their life.
Yeah, probably.
What are the biggest legal mistakes that you see business owners make when buying or selling a business?
A legal mistake is probably a strong term for it. I would say the biggest mistake is not treating it like it's the acquisition or the sale of your life, right?
Mhm.
I mean, this apart from even a house, right? Even a house is probably going to pale in comparison to the amount of money that has been, exchanging hands in even a small business deal, right? Could be many, many millions compared to the average price of a house, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So if you don't see it through that lens, if you think you're going to treat it like any other kind of business transaction you've done in your life, you're probably going to delay getting advisors in, right? Because who wants to pay an advisor? And advisors do cost money, lawyers cost money. I get the tension there. But by doing that, sometimes you can get into a deal and only involve, let's say, your lawyer later, and your lawyer might pick up on something that could have been very minor heartburn if caught early. Let's say a classic example, less applicable to home services, but I guess it could apply, is the assignability of contracts, right? Where certain key contracts aren't assignable to another legal entity, but that the purchase is structured as an asset acquisition. So to give your listeners a quick overview of what that is, it's when you reach into the shoebox and pick up only certain assets and you put them in another shoebox. That other shoebox is a different legal entity. It means you can't bring those contracts with you to that other shoebox. And you might have to restructure the deal as a stock sale, right? Which is where you just pick up the entire shoebox and put it down in another place, right? And because of, if you only get your lawyer involved later in the day, because you were just trying to save them fees, despite this being a many $1 million deal, you could give yourself much more heartburn later on. So I always think a big mistake is just not treating it sufficiently seriously, considering the amount of money that's going to be changing hands.
Now, if I own a home service business, mentioning that industry because that's who mostly is reading and listening, or really any business, what are some things I could do to maximize the value of my business for a future sale? And that sale could be I want out in the next year. That sale could be I may want to sell this thing a decade from now. What are things I could or should be doing so if and when that day comes, I'm as prepared as possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the answer is probably not really a legal one, right? And that's because most businesses are valued on a multiple of EBITDA, of net income, right? So the question, I think there's two questions that raises. One would be how do you get net income to be as high as possible? Okay, and that's, there's a whole bunch of levers you have as a business, right? To increase revenue, to decrease expenses, whatever you want to do. Uh, and then the second part of that question is, how do I make sure uh, my EBITDA is the EBITDA that will be used to value the business? And what does that mean? That means, are you running your personal expenses through your business? That's going to be a problem, right? If you want to sell your business and maximize its value, you have to start thinking about it today. And you might have to take some short-term pain in terms of how you do your accounting to get you there. That's probably one of the biggest issues we see when we look at valuations. The QEV expert, the quality of earnings expert will come in and say, well, actually, there's all these problems, and actually the EBITDA is much lower than you're advertising it to be, because you're getting paid in cash, and you're trying to claim it, but you're actually not running it through your tax returns or something like that, right? So that's something that you can get out ahead of today by addressing. And then I think there's a softer element of selling a business. So if you can maximize its value, its purchase price, the other side of it would be, how do I make it easy to sell? And making a business easy to sell is trying to eliminate some of the risks of then transactions. So uh, is there the risk that me as the owner has a lot of this business in their head, or a lot of the relationships turn on my personal relationships? And if they do, then that might be a problem for a buyer coming in, right? They might want to see you have more systems and processes in place, or perhaps some kind of diversification of the client base that isn't just based on your personal relationships. So these are things you can start thinking about today too, that just make your business more saleable if you want to try and obtain that top dollar, that maximum amount of the valuation. And then finally, if you're looking at things that just make it harder to buy a business, uh, are you doing anything that's just illegal, right? Like home services is a good one. I think a good example of home services is if you, let's say, have a lawn care business, are your workers, are they legitimate? Are you filling out I-9s? These kinds of things will give buyers the creeps, right? Because they obviously come with potential penalties if they were to buy the company and the government were to come after them. So if you're doing anything like that, or you're not up to date on your compliance checks, again, start thinking about that today. Start getting those issues worked out. If you're looking to sell, particularly if you're looking to sell like within 3 years, which gives you lots of runway to work out these issues, you'll have a great clear history, and most of the problems will be behind you.
If I woke up today and I said, Hal, you've seen so many deals and you know what works and doesn't. And I said, my goal right now is to sell a business. Let's assume I'm a relatively competent entrepreneur. I have some background, I have some connections, I could get some fundraising. I'm a competent person with some network. I've been around the block. Um, and so I can do a lot, right? I'm not a 22-year-old kid trying to scrape his way to his first 100K. Um, let's even say maybe I have $500,000 to start this thing with, and I want to sell it for the most amount of money possible 8 years from now. What business would you tell me to start, and what other advice would you give me on how to start that business?
Are you asking particularly with a home services business, or
Any
are you
any
asking
industry, any industry.
the businesses I see that always make my eyes pop when I see the amount of money they're being sold for, especially when considering how long they've been running for, is e-commerce.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you have the skills to nail that, I buy in China and sell in America for a big markup, and I use social media and other forms of advertising to wag the tail of my business dog, uh, you're going to probably be okay. You'll probably make quite a lot of money. Uh, there's also just low overheads in those kind of businesses normally, right? Or any kind of online business that a traditional brick and mortar business doesn't have. Now, the downside to that is these aren't the enduringly profitable companies that the ETA community was originally orientated around, right? These are kind of the opposite. They're being propped up by very, very good marketing, and you have to be on top of that game, as opposed
Yeah.
to a home services business like a plumber, which is kind of the opposite, right?
Right.
Often zero marketing, very essential skill, great reputation in a community. What do you do when you need a plumber in your house? You ask your friend who they worked with, right? A lot of it's word of mouth.
For sure.
So the flip side is that's great if you're looking to just maximize an exit. If you're looking to buy something and hold on to it for a long time, maybe that's not the best choice, right? Maybe the home services business is the much better choice.
Right. Okay. So ecom sounds like right now what's making a lot of sense to you. And then same question for buying a business. I just came into, let's scenario it out, $10 million from a windfall from a family member, a rich uncle somewhere, and I could park it in the S&P 500, but I want to do something a little more involved and hopefully beat the S&P over a 5 or 10 year period. What business should I put my searcher hat on, become an ETA, and go find? What type of business would you recommend?
What are your goals? Are you looking to buy and hold, or are you looking, is this going to be a company you're the boss of for the next generation, or are you looking to buy and
No.
quickly sell?
I'm curious what your answer would be for both scenarios. Scenario A being I want to buy this and pass it on to my kids. So maybe buy something more enduring, a multi-generational business, scenario A. And then scenario B is I want to make as big a return as possible in the next, call it 10 years.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first one is I would go where you think you'd most enjoy working. And what do I mean by that? So sometimes we help clients buy, for example, a manufacturing business. We did one last year, maybe the year before, that was non-ferrous material machining, for example, like very, very steady blue collar business. Uh, and the if you're going to buy that kind of business, you will have to, on day one, go into that shop, right, where they're doing this machining, and you will have to look at people who are probably, pretty skeptical of your, depending on your background, might be pretty skeptical of who you are as a new owner. And some people, I think, won't like that experience. That will be challenging for them. Uh, Another example, you want to buy a lawn services business? Do you like being outside? Will you enjoy managing your team? I mean, I think a lot of people have this unrealistic expectation that they'll buy one of these businesses and manage it all remotely from home. And I just don't think that's true. So if you're going to buy any business, the first question is, are you excited about the possibility of owning and operating that business? And if you're looking to buy and hold, then yes, enduringly profitable, right? So if you're going to buy that lawn care business, then is it one that's well rooted in the community? Has lots of repeat customers over the years? Is it servicing people's lawns for a decade, or is it just every summer they get a bunch of new customers coming in and rotating? These are all things you should be looking at and thinking about. On the buy and exit, that model only works if you have the skills to rapidly grow a company, right? Or to at least appreciably grow a company. Because if you're looking to sell for an increased multiple, an increased amount on potentially on the same multiple, then you're going to need to grow the company in some way. What skills do you have that make you think you can do that? Are you, for example, a marketing expert? Have you worked your whole life in corporate America in marketing? You might very well have the skills to take a whole bunch of businesses on at that point, right? And market them. Or are you an operations specialist? Have you done a lot of operational work? And if so, what businesses are out there where you can apply that specialist knowledge to growing that business? And I think that is the more important thing than what the business is. If you're looking to buy an exit, is where can you add value into that business, which makes that exit worthwhile.
Makes sense. Love it, Hal. What else? What else do you want to share? Anything else we didn't cover that you think might be helpful for the audience?
Yeah, I think if people are looking, well, let's take it back to what your podcast is centered around, which is
Right.
home services.
Yes, sir.
If you're looking to get into this industry, well, I mean, it's more than industry, right? It's an umbrella of industries. If you're looking to get into it, I would just say, as someone evaluating the legal risks, is try and think about several buckets of risk that are probably most pertinent to what you're doing. The first one, and applies to every business you may look at, home services or not, is can the seller sell you the thing they're trying to sell? Your lawyer can help you answer that question, but it's not always straightforward. And if you get any signs in your initial diligence that there may be an issue, like there's only one owner according to the broker, but there's clearly two people involved in this business, just make a note of it and make sure that you run down those risks. A second risk that's a bit more pertinent to home services is employees, right? So employees can be a big source of risk when buying a business. So again, we mentioned the I-9s, right? Have they been having all their employees fill out those I-9s? Very critical. Violations of those kind of laws, especially with the current administration, might be quite heavily penalized. You want to make sure that the business you're looking at buying is on the right side of employment and labor laws. And then a final really big bucket that's quite important to look at, again, for most businesses, for all businesses, is taxes. Again, engage a professional to look at tax returns, make sure that the taxes match what the business is saying it's doing in terms of its operational results. Because whenever you have a problem with taxes, sure, you can structure deals as an asset deal. You may not be liable as a successor post-closing, but the problem with those kind of issues is if the IRS decides that you're liable, they have resources to come after you, right? So you just want to be very careful around employees and taxes, is particularly. And there's other buckets to be careful about, but I think for home services, they're probably the two ones I'd be particularly worried about.
Great call outs. Great call outs. Love it, Hal. Thank you. Thank you for the breakdown. For people that want to learn more and follow you and maybe get in contact with you as either, buy or sell side representation, let the people know where they can connect with you, connect with Groundswell, and where folks can find you.
Yeah, I am active on X and on LinkedIn. Do we have show notes? If so, I can leave my contact information in the show notes.
Yep. We'll definitely put links and all that good stuff. But what's your handle, just in case people don't read that.
Yeah, so my handle so LinkedIn and X, I'm easiest to find by my full name. So Hallam, which is an unusual name, it's not an English surname that I have as my first name. Hal Stanton, that's Hallam, Stanton, my second name, Stanton, all one word, and you'll be able to find me.
Cool, got it. Love it. Thank you, Hal. Thank you for coming on, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, I really appreciate Bryan. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak to you a little bit about things that interest your audience.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.